So I was a student government at the university I go to here in Oregon. This was early 2018, so not very long ago at all. I had gotten elected Speaker of the House, and so before the school year ended, I went to a few House meetings to get the gist of what I was going to be doing. Then I met some acquaintances with people I'd work with the next school year, but I also met the man I will refer to as Dr. Strange. Dr. Strange, sorry fans, was a graduate representative and a physical chemistry PhD student. He was also a teaching assistant, which does come up later. Anyways, I could tell he was weird, but no one really thought he was evil in any way. Fast forward to Christmas break 2017. I'm at home and I get an email from our school's newspaper asking me some interview questions. They were pretty innocuous, but the last one threw me. How do you feel about having a white supremacist in your House of Representatives? What the fuck? Honestly, at first, I thought they were referring to me. I was also a member of college Republicans and figured they were insinuating I was a white supremacist. This wasn't long after the 2016 election, so it wasn't too hard a conclusion to jump to. For the record, I'm a very moderate Republican, was a Kasich guy, and didn't vote for Trump. Anyways, I get back to school and sit down with the guy who sent the email. Turns out Dr. Strange had basically begged for the paper for an interview where he laid out his beliefs. White ethno-state intelligence can be based on race and gender, etc. I was pretty shocked. He'd won 2 elections, so he clearly was just waiting for the right time to drop this bombshell. Anyways, after a lot of discussion with my colleagues in the school's legal counsel, I decided the best thing to do would be to have him recalled rather than expelled from student government. If he had planned this far, he clearly just wanted us to expel him outright, thus giving him the opportunity to be all my free speech, the thought police. People weren't happy, but it did work, and I don't regret it. A lot of my colleagues and administrators thought that I did the right thing. I even had a professor who was in Antifa who gave me an A after missing most of her class to deal with this, and we're actually good friends now, me and the professor. Now here's where things get dark. The paper published his interview with his picture. Apparently, he was photographed at all kinds of Holocaust denial rallies, and a few of those riots in Portland you hear all about. He was also photographed putting bumper stickers with a really racist message on other people's cars. The police saw his picture and arrested him. He went to jail for something like 40 days. Fast forward to after his sentencing and jail time. The trial took a while. It's about a year later, and I'm with my girlfriend. I had recently commented for an article by a conservative media outlet. It was something about a food and social justice certificate our school offers. I was quoted as saying something to the effect of, "As long as students can dissent in their classes, I don't really care what the professor is lecturing on." I see that I missed an email from Dr. Strange. The entire email is just my copy-pasted quote and a sentence. "No one likes a hypocrite, OP." I'm a little shook. He's not a very intimidating guy, and I'm in the military, so I'm not incredibly concerned until I think about it some more. This guy was part of a whole big band of Nazis. He definitely has friends in my area. In fact, The leader of his Nazi group is pretty well known in Oregon, and some of the evidence against him when the student government was discussing it was Discord servers with a ton of people in them. Moral of the story: I bought a gun. Doctor Strange and all your Nazi pals, for everyone's safety, let's not meet. This will be short compared to other stories. First, I should say that when I was growing up, my mom had a lot of undiagnosed mental health issues. One of the more minor things she suffered from was extreme anxiety and social awkwardness, but in this case, it had a significant impact on what would come. I must have been around the age of 8 to 10. I can't remember exactly. We lived in a very small town in the north of Scotland, which also happened to be only a mile or so away from a sort of spiritual retreat that is fairly well known. Because we had this spiritual place so close to us, we would get a lot of, shall we say, weird people coming into our town. I don't mean to suggest that spiritualness equals weirdness, but the reality is that did attract a lot of weird people to the area. So one day, my mom and my little brother and I went up to the high street to get some groceries. Just a usual Friday afternoon. Outside of the grocery store, before making our way home, there was this guy with a huge dog. Off the top of my head, I can't remember the name of the breed of dog, but it was one of those huge dogs with the most beautiful, pure white and fluffy fur. My brother and I were fascinated with it. The guy got to chatting my mom, and for what seemed like an eternity, due to her anxiety, she found it difficult to end conversations. Eventually, she managed to get him to stop talking, and we started walking home. The guy with the dog had a van where he had converted the back into a sleeping area for him and his dog. Instead of just saying bye and going on his way, he put the dog in the back and then proceeded to drive behind us at a pace that was slower than the pace we were walking at. When we got home, he parked up right outside our front door. When we got in, my mom shut the curtains and said to ignore him. On Saturday morning, my brother and I got up early, and when we peeked out of the curtains, he was still there, but standing with his dog right outside the wall to our garden, staring into our living room window. It feels weird as fuck saying this now, but honest to God, our mom made us turn off all the lights and just crawl around so the guy would think we were not in. For the next 2 days, he would keep coming up to our door, banging on it, and when we got no response, he would come to the living room window and bang on that, shouting that he knew we were in and just wanted to be friends. Things like that. He eventually fucked off. I don't know how weird it is that my mom just didn't call the police or a friend for help, but I can forgive her for suffering mental ill health at the time. As for the guy, though, let's never meet again, you absolute weirdo serial killer in the making. This story happened years ago when I was 6 or 7, maybe 8. My mom and dad went to go visit family for a reunion, I think. It was located at a beachside park and there was a playground nearby. It was a fun day with swimming and barbecues, but the day was coming to a close. My parents were chatting with the other adults, and I went to the playground because I was bored. I didn't think to tell my parents because I was a dumbass at that age. I assumed they'd see me, so it was fine, right? As I was playing, a couple approached the playground. They were both Caucasian, with the lady having wavy red hair and some blemishes. She wore a faded overcoat and boots. The man was taller than her, and he had a bald head and was wearing a blue tracksuit. They both looked like middle-aged parents, in their late 40s. I didn't care about them until they walked up to me. They then waved at me and said hi, so I said hi back. I didn't come down from the playset. Then they asked me, "Hey, where are your friends?" Me, being stupid, said that I didn't come with any and just came with my relatives. I pointed in the direction of the beach. They weren't far enough that I couldn't see them, probably 100 feet or so away. The couple then tried to make small talk about stuff I liked, where I lived, my home phone number, all the red flags I had run from today. But I was blind to them back then. Thank whoever's out there that I didn't remember my home phone or address back then and only answered questions about the things I liked. I started coming down the playset too when the lady of the couple asked that question. The question that I'll always remember. "We can be your friends, you know. Don't you want a friend who will never let you go?" My response wasn't the most normal to that question. Instead of screaming for help, I hopped down to the other side of the playset towards my parents and called for them to come over. I believe I called out, "Mama, Papa, look, I made some new friends." Now for the past 7 or so minutes, I guess, my parents and relatives were looking for me frantically since I wandered off. When I called for my parents, my mom heard and started to run over. I'm guessing she saw the couple. The couple looked at each other for half a second, realized my dumbass was not worth it, and ran off towards the parking lot. My mom then came to me and gave me a big hug. She then asked what happened, and I told her about the friends I made. What we talked about and how I was sad they ran off. My mom just sighed and called the cops. My mom told them about what happened and they asked me what the couple looked like. Being a kid at the time, my descriptions were vague and basic. The cops left and we decided to pack up and drive home. On the way home, my mom gave the stranger danger talk and I listened. I don't know if they were ever caught. I hope they were, for the sake of dumb kids everywhere. Or that this deterred them from nabbing kids ever again, because they were almost caught. Either way, out there or not, creepy child napping couple, let's not meet. Ever. Some context. It was about 2 weeks after I become homeless and the council put me in a B&B. I had met this man and his partner a week before at breakfast. The B&B had a policy that we needed to be out of the place for a couple of hours while they did housekeeping. So this man, Mark, and his partner Anna and I were walking about the area nearby and we went up to a lovely park nearby. Mark grabbed my hand without my being okay with it, and Anna said to just let him as he won't do anything. There's me, a young woman who has just escaped an emotionally abusive relationship with my mom and had sexual abuse happen in my past. Frozen in place. I just felt like I was frozen in a block of ice. Thankfully, I was moved to a different temporary accommodation a few months later, but they were kicked out due to breaking B&B's rules, and the guy punched a hole in the wall of their bedroom about a month after this had happened. So glad I've never seen them again. This may not be the creepiest story, but I still kicked myself for stupidity during this event. This happened during the summer when I was 14, about 16 years ago. My parents had just moved me to the new house they had built in a rural part of Pennsylvania. It was 2004 and the housing market hadn't crashed yet, so our new house was one of the first in this brand spanking new neighborhood. It is the kind of neighborhood you drive through and go, yep, these people have money. I hadn't started school yet in my new town, so I had no friends to really hang out with that summer. I spent a lot of time just hanging out with my mom, taking drives around our new area and staying up and watching movies. One night in early August, we had just finished watching something and were getting ready to go to bed. It was one of those summer nights that caused the windows to fog up from the cool air out inside. You couldn't see anything out of the windows unless you pressed your face to them. As we turned everything in the downstairs off, we saw headlights come down our street. Mind you, it was about 1 a.m. in a brand new neighborhood with about 4 houses in it and maybe 2 more under construction. We didn't have neighbors at this point, and there was literally no reason for someone to be on our street unless they were A, lost, or B, looking to steal shit. We hope it's A and keep going about our business to get ready for bedtime. And then we see a reflection of another light outside of our house. And it wasn't car lights. Once again, we can't see out of our fogged windows, so me being a curious 14-year-old, I walk right up to the front door and pressed my face to the window, and immediately fell right to the floor. There was a face staring back at me. My mom asked me what was wrong, and I just started stammering. Then my adrenaline kicked in. I ran to the kitchen and opened the knife drawer. I pulled out a butcher knife and walked back to the front door. I'm still shaking from basically being nose to nose with a stranger, and my 14-year-old brain thought this was a great idea. I flung open the door and wielded the butcher knife, and to my shock and surprise, I see not 1 but 3 full-grown men outside. And my dumbass just ran full speed towards them with a butcher knife over my head. And they ran. I mean, like fucking booked it while yelling very audible, "Holy shit!" And then my mother called the police while yelling at me for being such a dumbass. But despite my stupidity in the situation, I've always been slightly proud of 3 grown men being afraid of a tiny 14-year-old girl wielding a butcher's knife. So, let's not meet. Also kind of wonder if those guys could have a reverse let's not meet story for this. This happened when I was 16. My stepdad has this uncle who, for as long as I can remember, I've gotten really bad vibes from. It's hard to explain why. It's kind of mostly just been instinctual. He always just tried being playful towards all the little girls in our family, like tickling them and such, and I was always creeped out by it and kept my interactions with him to the bare minimum ever since I was like 8. Anyway, one day during the summer, I was sitting at my kitchen table with 2 other girlfriends, and Mr. Creepy Uncle just walks right into my house. It wasn't abnormal for people to come and go as they pleased at my house during that time, but he was not someone who ever just swung by and walked in before. He looks at my friends and me and asks, "Are your parents home?" I say no. Then he asks if we want some candy. I say nothing, but one of my friends, sweet summer child, says, "I mean, yeah, I'd love some candy." He says, "Okay, but you have to come into my van to get it." Both me and my other friend basically said, hell no. Then he's like, "Are you sure? It's really good candy." We obviously refuse, and after some more probing, he's basically just like, okay, your loss. I told my mom, and at the time, she didn't make a huge deal about it. Probably because he's an idiot for thinking he could lure 3 16-year-olds in a van with candy. But she's someone who has admitted to getting bad vibes from him too. Now that I'm an adult and have talked to her more about it, she's told me that's basically the consensus in our family. All of the women are creeped out by him, and absolutely no one trusts him with their kids. She also told me that he definitely has a record and has spent more time in prison, but no one in the family will talk about why. I think maybe they're trying to protect him because he's just a lonely old bachelor and they figure he's harmless. But what would he have done if we got in his van? Creepy uncle, we will unfortunately probably meet again, but I don't want your goddamn candy. I apologize for this post being so vague. It happened several years ago and there is a lot that I can't recall. The events aren't nearly as interesting or horrifying as some of the posts on here, but I think it's a good illustration of how instinct works and why it's important to listen to those gut feelings. A few years ago, I was sitting in a Starbucks inside a Barnes & Noble, playing on my phone and sipping on my drink. I was kind of off to the side, so the baristas probably didn't have a good view of my table. Even though there was hardly anyone in the place except me, all of a sudden an older guy plops down at my 2C table and starts talking to me. I honestly can't remember anything he said to me, just that he started talking to me abruptly and was asking slightly personal questions. Nothing crazy offensive, but I remember that there wasn't a whole lot of lead up to the conversation. He just started talking and asking questions. Part of the reason I can't remember is because of how long ago it was, but the bigger reason was simply fear. I was so incredibly frightened and I did not know why. The man wasn't particularly threatening, although he did have kind of intense eyes. He didn't say anything really scary, I'm pretty sure. Even if the baristas couldn't see us, we were still in a very public place. I dealt with creeps like this all the time and didn't feel this way, so what was it? I had my phone in my hand and I just kept imagining calling my dad and pretending he was the one who called me. Just something simple to let me stop talking to this guy and make an exit. But I couldn't do it. All I could do was keep my head down and stare at my phone, mumbling vague answers to the guy's questions. I was just completely frozen. Eventually, probably after only a couple of minutes, if that, the guy just got up and left without saying anything. I immediately left. On the way home, I kept thinking about the man and picturing him in my mind, reliving the encounter when I finally realized who he was. I had seen him before. About 5 years before that, I was at some store when I walked in and at the same time as an older man, maybe in his 40s or 50s. He was bald, had kind of intense eyes, and carried a pretty clunky cane. I remember because I thought that even if he was older, he still looked a little too young for a cane like that. I thought at the time that maybe he was disabled in some way, so I held the door for him. I bumped into him a few times in the store, smiling politely each time. Finally, I bumped into him in the manga section, and he said to me, "If we keep running into each other, you're gonna have to tell me your name." I laughed awkwardly and went to get my dad in the music section. I'd realized that the guy had probably been following me around the store, especially since he wasn't really looking at any of the stuff in the sections we ran into each other in. I told my dad and he agreed, so we left. I wasn't really scared at the time, just annoyed. but it was definitely him. Same eyes, same bald head, same cane. I had a mini panic attack while driving. That had been 5 years ago. Had that man been following me all this time? Did he see my license plate when I left? Was he following me home? Did he even need that cane, or did he use it to hit girls like me in the head? After I calmed down, I realized that he probably didn't even recognize me, and that specific Barnes & Noble was probably just his haunt. I went there all the time and had only seen him twice in like 5 years, after all. In fact, I still go there regularly and have never seen him again. I just think it was fascinating how my subconscious recognized him and tried to warn me before I consciously remembered. Somewhere deep in my mind, I was thinking, "Stalker alert!" I probably felt such intense fear because of that subconscious recognition, despite it most likely being a weird coincidence. The man probably was just a run-of-the-mill creep at the end of the day, but for a moment, he was an evil, stalking serial killer in my subconscious. Well, I guess he still could have been, but I got home safely and never saw him again. And I am truly grateful for all that information stored in the back of my mind that could one day save my life. So please listen to your gut feelings. You may be recognizing a stalker or a criminal in the newspaper, someone you know is bad news, but you can't quite remember why. There is a reason you feel that way, and though it may end up being a less sinister than you think, it could also save your life. I was walking down Penn Station after a long afternoon of shopping. This pretty good-looking guy came up to me and asked me how I was doing. He was pretty young, probably in his 20s, and quite cute. I was in a relationship though, so I nicely rejected his offer to take me out for lunch. That's when he got aggressive. Since I'm of Asian descent, he started the racist comments. Began telling me, "I have fried rice and dumplings back at mine. How about you come home with me? And Asian pussy is supposed to be tight." It didn't faze me until he grabbed my arm and tried to pull me along with him. I yelled at him to stop and leave me alone, but he didn't. Everyone was looking at us by this point, but no one was helping. He then pretended I was his girlfriend and said, "Baby, don't be mad." I very loudly said, "I don't know you. Please just leave me alone." I'm honestly shocked at the mom standing beside me, who had been walking side by side with us this whole time, but refused to catch my eye and help me. When this fight started escalating, she told her daughter to cross the street with her. I couldn't believe she'd happily let someone else's daughter endure this treatment. For context, I wasn't even dressed provocatively, just in jeans and a sweater. Even if I wore my most promiscuous outfit, it wouldn't warrant the harassment or lack of help. I finally made it down to Times Square while he kept grabbing at my ass and trying to coax me into coming back with him. He even proposed paying me $1,000 to come home and make a sex tape with him and his black friend. He said his black friend loved Asian pussy too, and he'd show me a good time. He then offered me drugs that would blow my mind. Once in Times Square, I knew there'd be police around. I grabbed the guy's hand at this point. He thought I was finally saying yes to his advances and dragged him to the cops. I told them, "This guy has been following me and sexually harassing me since Penn Station. Please do something." However, the two female cops were slow to comprehend, and he had yanked his arm away and ran out of the store. The female cops then apologized and said they'd walk me out of the store. When we were out of the store, they asked me if I could spot him. Meanwhile, they were calling other officers to come through. I saw the guy standing at the end of the street, eyeing me and waiting for me. I pointed this out and they went after him. Bless them. The male officers then walked me further out into my hotel lobby and apologized on his behalf. Might not be as scary as some of the encounters here, but this had me trembling. I was paranoid that he had seen what hotel I was staying at and would follow me. I'm just glad the police took care of my worries seriously and made sure that I was safe. This happened when I was probably 7 or 8. I don't remember all the details, but I remember some really messed up stuff. When I was a kid, I lived in a pretty sketchy neighborhood. We lived in those long apartments, the ones that are attached at the sides rather than stacked on top of each other. The front of the apartments faced the main road, and there was a little side street to access the parking and backyards of the apartments. Behind the apartments was a massive field. It was super overgrown, so much it was almost a little forest, and my friends and I used to go back there to build hobbit holes in the grass. My mom hated it when we went back out there because there were some rough people that lived in the neighborhood, and she didn't like a group of 7-year-olds playing out where people also shot up heroin. I'm adding a photo so you can see what it looks like. The purple circle was our apartment. One day, I was out of the woods by myself just exploring and pretending to be Indiana Jones or something. As I was coming out of the tall grass, I could see a little black alley in between the parking/houses and the woods, and I saw a deer lying in the grass. I thought it was just sleeping, so I crept up on it to try to scare it. I know, not cool. When I got there, I knew something was off. The deer was too still, and it smelled horrible. I couldn't see its face as its back was facing me, but when I got up to it, I nearly had a heart attack when I saw that its entire stomach was ripped open, and all of the insides were spewed around the ground. I wasn't a smart kid, but I knew that this was fucked up. When I turned to run back home to tell my mom, I saw a second deer nailed to the tree next to the first one. I don't know how I didn't notice this before, but its 2 front hooves were nailed above its head to the tree. The stomach was also cut open, and the ribs had been broken open to expose the gaping hole. As I stood there, staring at it, a car drove past on the little alley. I remember it was a white car with tinted windows and was driving really slowly. I mean, everyone drove slowly on this alley because it was a residential street, but these people were barely even moving. I couldn't see inside, but I got the sinking feeling that they were just watching me. Obviously, I can't be sure that they were the ones who mutilated the deer, but I'm like 99% sure it was them. Once they were gone, I booked it home and told my mom the whole thing. She told me not to go into the field anymore, and I happily agreed. I didn't particularly enjoy seeing a deer's insides, and I would have loved to just forget about the whole thing. For the next month or so, I saw that car everywhere. It would drive up the main road while I was playing in the front yard. It would drive down the back alley when I would be in the backyard. And I even remember seeing it at the grocery store when my mom and I went shopping. That could have just been another tinted windowed white car, but they were definitely stalking the house. It was always the white car, always the tinted windows, and always driving too slowly to be normal. I told my mom about it, but she chalked it up to just being a neighbor down the road or something. One day, my mom was out mowing the front lawn. Because of how the apartments were set up, she had to push the lawnmower around all of the apartments to get our backyard. Being the helpful little kid I was going to meet my mom out back to open the gate for her so she could put the lawnmower in the little shed. As I'm walking out to the gate, I see the car come along the back alley. Normally the car goes slow. As soon as it turned the corner, however, The driver stepped on the gas and zoomed up to me. The back door closest to me opened, and someone got out, started running towards me. I don't remember what he looked like, or even if it was a he. I just remember hauling ass back into the house and pissing myself the whole time. After that, my dad yelled at me for peeing myself, and neither he nor my mom believed me about the guy in the car. I never saw him again after that, and we moved a few months later. My parents still think I made the whole thing up, even though they know how sketchy the neighborhood was. I don't remember anyone going missing around that time in my town, and I didn't find anything when I Googled it. But it was really messed up, and I have no idea who those people in the car were, why they mutilated the deer, or what they had planned for me. To the creepy people in the white car, let's not meet. I live in a cute podunk, said with affection, town in Japan. It's the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and I teach the kids of my mechanic, landlord, etc. I can play Pokemon Go at 3 a.m. with nary a worry beside mosquito bites and spider webs. Or I could. See, there have been some new boys in town. We're not sure where they work. Their English is decent. They're from Sri Lanka. The ones I've spoken to, at least, and they're incredibly horny for non-Japanese women. Like, insanely horny. Like, every day, if they catch you, they'll tell you it's their last day in town before they go home. So won't you please hang out with them so they can leave on a good note? They harassed a friend of mine down the road a few months back and caught me once late at night. Luckily, I was driving, so I zoomed away after an awkward conversation. My friend was severely pressured to hang out at the one guy's place. She's from a small city in Hungary and wasn't used to stuff like that, but I told her to fuck politeness if it ever happened again. Recently, the heat has kept them away, or they really did go home for a bit, but now they're back. I just got back from walking to the local corner shop, a 5-minute walk where I see more rice paddies than humans. I was almost at my apartment, and a car slows down as I head the last 50 feet to my apartment complex. It idles behind me as I grumble, but I'm not so fat that they can't just drive around me. The car creeps slowly behind me, and then alongside, the window rolls down. "Oh," he says chirpily, as if it isn't after midnight and he isn't being a creep. "Hello, where are you from?" I reply, "America," reflexively, since I'm asked all the time, but I recover enough to follow it with, "You're being really creepy. Go away, please." Unfortunately, when I get disquieted, I tend to reflexively use pleases and sorries excessively. As I said it, he was leaning his car to the left to make it difficult for me to walk past him, since I was walking along a wall. When I called him out, he actually stopped the car and I continued on my way, hard fluttering but doing my best to feign confidence by continuing to walk normally. He then drove past me. I made sure he saw me walking towards the opposite side of the apartments, then dodged up a covered stairwell on the correct side so he couldn't come back and see my apartment number. Luckily, I live in a very small community and have a great relationship with my bosses. I'ma make a big stink about this come Monday. I've dealt with shit like this in the States, but a group of bros trying to cajole a woman as they please is not something that'll be tolerated by the locals or me. I've got a baby face and usually seem quite tame, so men tend to aim for me as if I'm naive, but I'm not letting that shit slide. In order for us to never meet again, I'm going to do my damnedest to have everyone in town keep an eye on your thirsty asses. Edit. Sorry for not replying much. I'm working at an English camp for the next few days and phone time is limited. Thanks for the kind replies. This did actually happen. Sorry, it's not very interesting. My apologies if it doesn't match the LNM guidelines or whatever. I will update this post after I message my supervisor on Monday. I likely won't see much happen, but hopefully a local policeman will give them a talking to. Edit. I called relevant people and my supervisors are going to speak to my local Koban and ask them to have a word with these guys. Sorry that I didn't respond much to people. To be completely honest, I wrote this as a way to calm myself down afterwards. I wasn't thinking about how interesting or creepy people would find it. I get it, it doesn't follow into the desired subreddit content. I didn't expect so much feedback. Thanks for reassuring me and giving me well wishes and ideas. It didn't super stress me out. I only recently became able to comment regularly on Reddit after lurking for years. For whatever reason, it intimidates me and triggers my anxiety. I probably won't respond to any more comments. I don't want to dwell on what happened, and since I was stuck in an English camp for 3 days, it's been too long anyways. I wasn't intending to sound racist by mentioning they were from Sri Lanka. I said I was in Japan, so if I didn't specify, you might assume that they were Japanese. Japan has issue with domestic creeps as well, but being in a small town, I really never see much of it. They introduce themselves every time I met them as being from Sri Lanka, so it's stuck in my head. They're the first people I've ever met from Sri Lanka, but I by no means now equate the culture with these men. Thanks for being here as a subreddit. I needed to do this, and I'm grateful.